I'm talking today with David Bauders, President of Strategic Pricing Associates. Strategic pricing has been an increasingly hot topic over the last few years, especially going into the downturn that we're now coming out of. What I'd really like to talk about today is what strategic pricing looks like in this current economy. David, welcome.
Thank you. It's certainly an important topic. Not only is strategic pricing important generally, regardless of the economy, distributors in particular, because of their thin margins, need to make sure that their sales forces have the tools and training to be effective at pricing. But also in the current economy, given the increasing inflationary pressures and vendor cost increases that we're seeing, it's become a very pressing issue for distributors to recover those cost increases from their customers and not have them taken out of their shareholders.
Let's start out and tell us a little bit about SPA and its history and how you've developed the model.
I started SPA in 1993. We started out working with manufacturing companies, and we've worked with over 200 manufacturing businesses today. On the distribution side, SPA has worked with over 300 different distribution businesses. The core of what we do is to help companies to develop optimized pricing architectures, that is analyzing their true pricing performance to help them build new pricing structures to optimize their profitability, helping them to tighten their pricing processes to improve the coordination and control across the organization of how they price, and finally to train their sales forces in how to be effective using pricing tools and to have the confidence in front of the customer to get paid for the value that they deliver.
So is this a one-step exercise for a company to go through a strategic pricing project and then they're done?
It is an ongoing process, and we refer to it as a journey. It takes a long time for companies to truly change the culture of their sales forces. Our typical client takes about 90 days to go through the first wave of their pricing project to start earning results, and typically takes about 2 to 4 weeks of staff time over that 90-day period, preparing the data, sending it to SPA for analysis, and going through the training exercises.
What's the payback on this, David, that you've experienced with your clients?
Well, the first question for any company is how much of their revenue is truly in play. What we call net revenue in play is equal to the company's total revenue, and then we subtract out the revenue that is on long-term contracts that may be on vendor-dictated pricing agreements, national account agreements where they don't really control pricing. The number that is left after all of those subtractions is what we call net revenue in play. On that base of revenue, we can typically generate 200 to 400 basis points, that is 2 to 4 margin points, as a percentage of sales above and beyond their historical performance.
So if somebody continues to do this and pursue this, is there a long tail on this in terms of you may get the biggest return in a short amount of time, the low-hanging fruit, so to speak?
Well, there are a number of different ways in which the tail gets lengthened in terms of impact. The first is that the share of revenue that's in play can go up over time as you start to prune customer contracts, as you start to clamp down on overrides. Then not only are you earning gains on the baseline revenue in play, but you actually start to get more revenue through what we call the SPA pricing cube, that is the SPA pricing libraries. There are secondary gains that come from upgrading the analysis of product sensitivity, customer sensitivity, as well as customers' cost to serve and other behavioral characteristics. But the earliest extension of the gains comes from simply driving more revenue through the SPA pricing tool.
Can you talk a little bit more about pricing layers and how you deal with those?
We take 12 months of invoice history from our clients. We work with their management team to identify their major customer segmentation, typically a half a dozen or so major customer types that they sell to. We also work with them to do a product segmentation, so all of their vendor product family or cell group combinations. We ask them to rate at a high level the competitiveness of those vendor product families in the marketplace from very high to very low. Once we have their invoice data and those two basic sets of assignments, we can then run the SPA analytics. Our IT experts work with our clients to carefully scrub their data, to segregate rebated transactions, credits, other abnormal or extraneous data from the data set before it goes through the optimization routine. And then what we're doing fundamentally is we're helping clients to look within their own invoice history at what would be the optimized pricing structures for the non-contract portion of their business. That allows them to very quickly see where the gaps are, which customers are underpriced, by how much, on which products, and then to build the new architectures to clean that up. One of the other keys is not only optimizing through customer and product segmentation, but also helping customers to see where is the sensitivity in their product set. So most of our clients have thousands or tens of thousands of SKUs or part numbers. SPA looks at each customer's purchases in the invoice history to look at how they're buying the products, how frequently they buy the product, how much they spend on one product versus another, what their order quantities are, how repeatable those patterns are, in order to help our clients very specifically see where they need to focus their discounting to get the customer's business, and conversely where they should be extracting premiums on the products that are simply less price sensitive.
So the analytics really, it's not just about taking a look at the products, it's really understanding the segments and the behavior of the different customer segments as well.
That's right, and we do a very careful job to organize customers into the right segmentation, not only looking at how they use the product, but also looking within a segment to see, who are the small customers and other sizes of customers, because a lot of times the economics are very different from a tiny customer to a huge customer.
Can you talk a little bit more about what's involved in extracting those pricing layers?
Well, the most important thing that we do is segregate their data into contracts versus non-contract business, rebated versus what we would call flow business. As we go through the data extraction process, all of the transactions will be segregated appropriately so that, for instance, rebated transactions do not pollute the everyday pricing standards that are used for non-rebated situations. At the end of the day, the most important thing is for companies to have good basic pricing libraries to handle their non-contract business. But an SPA also offers a service to help clients reprice their contracts as they come up for renewal. Without those tools, a lot of companies' contract pricing is simply a black hole that never really improves.
So we've talked about the analytics piece of this, but there's also a human element in terms of getting this as part of a company's DNA and effectively often changing sales force behavior and company behavior in terms of how it's always approached pricing. Can you talk a little bit about that aspect?
Well, it really is a crucial area, and because it's one thing to develop the analytics and then the optimized pricing structures, but it's another thing to actually train the sales force and how to use them. We spend a lot of time training our client sales forces to know not only how the tools were developed and how to use them, but also how to be more effective negotiating with customers, how to communicate the value that they bring to their customers so that price becomes a secondary issue. The second key human dimension to it is simply helping our clients to map their pricing processes, to identify what are the roles and responsibilities within the organization, who has authority to override pricing, who's responsible for maintaining pricing structures, what are the limits. And the simple fact is that most companies have never really dug into or documented what is their pricing process. And if you don't define the process, you can't measure it, you can't manage it.
It seems like that training of the sales force and management really to implement is a critical thing. There's got to be a lot of fear both within the financial control part of a company as well as the sales force in terms of essentially flipping a switch and really changing how companies have managed their revenue streams. How do you mitigate some of that?
You want to work with people who know the vertical markets that you're in. You want to work with people who have great experience in data and who've trained the sales forces. It is true that the greatest fear and pushback that companies get as they embark on a pricing initiative is internal. That is, their sales forces have gotten used to and enjoyed, to a degree, the ability to make up prices as they go along. But the simple fact is that no sales rep is capable of setting prices for 30,000 products and knowing what the appropriate margins are. They need tools. It's crucial that you have good tools that work, that have been developed carefully and analytically. But then once you get past that, you have to really show the sales force, well, where are the lowest risk areas that you can go after first? So most SPA clients start out by going live with the program on their tiny and small accounts, the accounts who tend to be less price sensitive, the ones where the sales reps honestly were having a lot of trouble pricing consistently. Once they see that the system works with tiny and small accounts in the first 30 days, they make some adjustments, and then they start turning on the non-contract spend of their larger customer sizes. So you have to phase it in. You have to make it clear to the sales force that they need the tools, that they're carefully developed. But at the end of the day, that's where most of the contact is. We always say pricing's a contact sport, but the good news is almost all of the contact is internal.
Is it critical that the sales force essentially has no control over pricing whatsoever, that there's a hard and fixed floor and that's all they can do?
No, I think really every company has their own stance on what's the appropriate balance between control and flexibility. The most important thing is to give them tools to price effectively and then to measure their utilization of the tool. If every sales rep has a statistic, we call it ratio of attainment, that says what percent of the dollars that they were asked to price into the marketplace did they actually get, that statistic starts to create accountability for them. If they are asked to sell at $10 and they sell at $9, they have a ratio of attainment of 0.9. You can aggregate those data and really start to grade the sales force on how close is their pricing to what you ask them to do.
It sounds like, just as an example, that a sales rep may have a really good reason to go below the designated price structure that's been put in place, but at least now that sales rep really has the data and the framework for understanding where that is and be able to justify if that rep does go below.
Yeah, I think really this is where management is so important, because the best tools in the world and the best metrics in the world still require active sales management. What a lot of the SPA clients are doing now is using these reports, these ratio of attainment reports, to really engage their sales force in a much more substantive way about their performance.
Are there ways for distributors to use this strategically with specific suppliers as well?
We can show our clients which of their business is underperforming in terms of price, and sometimes the answer is to raise the customer's price. In other cases, they need to go back to their suppliers and say, you know what, these particular contracts or these particular customers are underwater in terms of their price levels, and we can try to get some of this from the customer, but fundamentally we need more cost support from our vendors.
So it's a profitability tool in terms of overall structuring the relationships with suppliers as well.
That's right. And other clients will go forth and say, we've been getting rebated on this particular account, and we think the price needs to go up. We want to be able to go after that price increase together. And sometimes they'll split savings with the vendor in exchange for an agreement to support that new price level.
You mentioned at the beginning of our call how strategic pricing fits in with the inflationary pressures we're beginning to see. Talk a little bit about that.
First of all, the vendor price increases that we're seeing right now are at much higher levels than we've seen in the last several years. And in fact, they represent both a window of opportunity for distributors as well as a threat. First of all, they represent a window of opportunity because all of the vendor price increases in the marketplace are creating a mass movement of competitors in the marketplace towards higher pricing. That is, there's cover in the marketplace now for a company to make changes in its pricing, to improve its profitability, and have support in the marketplace because other companies are doing the same and the vendors are doing the same. Conversely, companies that have not mastered their pricing architectures, that don't have tight pricing processes, or have not given their sales forces the tools to price effectively, risk having their vendor price increases being paid by their shareholders. And it's really that risk combined with that window of opportunity that means that people really need to take pricing seriously right now.
David, thanks so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you, Tom.